year I got funded, I ruptured a disc in my neck and I had to have disc surgery.
Taking a step back from it, like reassessing, like what is your why, like what is the actual reason you're doing this?
You know, because if you can put together year on year training without getting injured, then that is going to be the quickest route to success.
Such a bad place, like with things that I full started on purpose. Like,
action. Welcome back to another episode of the Athlete Place Talks. Today we've got a super exciting guest, two guests. And what I want to do today, because introducing yourself is incredibly awkward, so I'm going to make it even more awkward and get you to introduce each other.
Who goes first?
You can go first.
So we're joined by superstar athlete Seamus Derbyshire, 400 metre hurdler, with a list of accolades that are too long for me to remember. But you might have seen him on your TV doing some spectacular gymnastics at the European Championships in Munich last year, and I'm sure he'll fill in all the far more important details later on.
I really think that's my main claim to fame, to be honest. That's my biggest moment yet. And this is Matt. He is not only my psychologist, but a former international high jumper, again, with probably too many accolades that I can name off the top of my head. But yeah, has been a sort of a big part of my life and my journey as well for like two years or so now, since COVID. So
COVID, man, that was COVID was actually like the hardest thing for most athletes, I reckon. Like when we look back at it now and compare that time to when people were hurdling in their own gardens, like when you've got nothing else to do and like you weren't allowed to leave the house for a sport where you have to actually run around in circles. Like for you guys, how did your life change during that time from like a sports point of view? Like Matt, for you, I think over the last 2-3 years especially, you and your coaching has become more and more known, and you've really taken off, I think, with that in the last couple of years. How's COVID helped you in a coaching regard?
It changed everything. So for me, as we were kind of talking before we started recording about how the difficulties of post-uni, right? It's like suddenly welcome to the real world. You need to earn money and find time to train. And after I went through that, being super poor and it's crap, and athletics is really difficult. To find that balance of like, because you want to train like a full-time athlete, but at the same time you've got to pay this thing called rent. And eat.
What's that?
Yeah, right. Joe legitimately lives with his mum.
Yeah. Don't we all?
Right. So, but then when I retired, it's like, well, then you kind of get a job, right? And even though when I retired, that's when I started my coach training and went down this kind of route. I got sucked into full-time work because suddenly you have money in your pocket, and for the first time ever, it's like I actually didn't have to worry about, am I going to have enough money at the end of the month? Which is still, I'm still thinking I'm maybe about to move past it. Like I'm kind of like, I'm good now, but it affected me for a long time. But yeah, anyway, so the pandemic was amazing because I got put on furlough.
You're one of the only people to say that.
There's people there all like lost people, and I'm going, oh my God, it was great. I got paid to sit at home for 18 months. So I was it was difficult. It was touch and go at points whether the company I worked for was going to survive. It was literally, I spoke to one of my directors one week and they're like, look, if they don't extend the furlough in a week's time, we're going under. So, it could have been different, but in that time, I had space and time, and the opportunity arose. I got asked to coach someone, and then I didn't realise it at the time, but then in the process of doing it, it's like, oh, this is what I want to be doing. This is what I love and my passion. And so, yeah, that was, for me, that's the starting point, which, found me sat here with you guys.
Yeah. Seamus, what about you?
I feel like COVID was like the beginning of like a big sort of change for me, like athletically, because like you say, I moved home, I came away from uni, so I'd like left my training set up. and like everything was off your own back. For ages, you literally weren't meant to be leaving the house, so everything I was doing was like in my back garden, like around the streets. It was like
breaking the law.
Literally. And then eventually I'd be like, oh, I'll go to my old college and like use the grass track that we have there, like over these like hurdles that I've borrowed from the club and stuff. But like I think for me as well, that was the time where I was like, wow, I have so much extra time. Like I probably wasn't as committed to university as I should have been in that period. And I was like, I'm just going to use this to be like train as a full-time athlete. I'm going to become so good. Like this is like my dream. And then I also found, like I say, this is sort of like post that year going into the next season, like post-COVID, where we kind of had like a proper-ish sort of season, was when I felt a lot of that pressure then like stacked onto me, because I feel like I'd used the last like year as, oh, I'm a professional athlete, and I had all this pressure on me from those experiences. So COVID year, I think I finished about 50% of my races, and then the following year I finished again about 50% of my races, until like eventually I was like, you know what, like I've had enough. Like this isn't what I want to do. Like I'm not enjoying this anymore. And it was almost like the complete opposite of what I expected, because I was like, I'm giving it my everything. This is going to become like the most successful period of my life. And it literally became like the worst period of me athletically, like mentally, physically, like emotionally. Like I hated everything about it. And like I say, it ended up with me just after a year just being like, yeah, I need to like step away for a bit, because I'm like really not enjoying it, which was not the plan at the start of it.
What was the thing you weren't enjoying? Like if you were to pick one of those things, because it was probably a collective of things, right? But what was the standout thing that you weren't enjoying?
I feel like the thing I wasn't enjoying the most was, like I said, just the pressure I was putting on myself. I believed, because I'd had all this time to focus like solely on athletics, I was like, I need to be doing this, I need to be hitting this. Like if I'm not performing to X level straight away, like what a waste of my time, like why am I bothering? And that's where a lot of my like DNSs came from, because if something wasn't perfect, I was like, oh, what's the point? Like I put way too much effort in for this, like for it not to be like 100% what I want. So yeah, I just think the emotional toll of like being such a perfectionist and like wanting to fulfill the potential I knew I had, but I was doing it in such an unhealthy way for myself.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And like when you look back on that time and compare it to when you were younger, how was it different?
When I was younger, like I didn't know I'd be good. I like did gymnastics for 8 years before I did athletics, and the only reason I moved was because I like stopped enjoying gymnastics as much, and I was like, oh, I really enjoy athletics. Like I do it at school and it's so fun. Like I'll do that instead now. So, and that's like the like sort of thing I've taken with me all my life. Once I stop enjoying something, I will stop and like try and find something new. And yeah, when I started athletics, I didn't think I'd be any good at it. So I was just like rocking up to like these random competitions after like training for 3 months, and then like I was like kind of good. So I was like, oh, I kind of enjoy it like a bit more. But like again, I was never like the best. I was like good and always wanted to achieve more, but I never was like at the level that I'm like fortunate to be at this day. So everything back then was literally just based on like me enjoying myself, and that was like the main thing that when I started speaking to Matt was like, I need to rekindle like the joy I had for it, because I think I described to you like it was becoming a chore. I was like, I do this because this is what I have to do. I show up to the track on a Monday morning because I have to do it. I have to do this. And it was so like robotic and automated. I was never turning up because I was like, oh, I love this. I want to do this. It had just become my life. And I felt like, oh, I have to stick to these like rules of what my life is.
Really interesting. I remember when I stopped athletics and was going through my burnout side of things, I remember saying to my mum and to people around me that it felt like I was like working a 9 to 5 that you weren't getting paid for.
Literally.
And it's like, it gets to that point where you're just like, what is it all for? And like for me, one of the main things like that made me kind of stop with the sport and everything, well, I say that at the time that I was thinking, was it felt like a 9 to 5 I wasn't getting paid for, and I didn't want to get to 30 having just run around in circles. Yeah. And that's something that as an athlete is quite common. Like I remember speaking to a few of my mates a few months ago, and they were like applying for jobs, and they go to apply for jobs and you go, hold on a minute, I've not got anything to put on my CV. Yeah. And it's like, these are the realities that sports people are facing if they're trying to pursue this goal of being an elite athlete, being an Olympian, being the best they can possibly be physically. But at the same time, essentially limiting other areas of their life because you can't, quote, can't have it all.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I was just relating, to be honest. Just thinking, just thinking, like, because you end up in this situation where you kind of go, well, I've kind of gone all in, and I did go all in. So I mean, you're looking at someone that retired when they were 32, and I was funded for 1 year, right? So once I was in, it's like, well, I've already put all of it, sacrificed all of this. Like, if I quit now, what does that mean? There's no value in all of that work that I've done, and at the same time, kind of knowing that I could achieve so much more. So I was almost burdened by the commitment I'd made, and driven by the knowing that I could do more, but was almost trapped in that, and it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard. But when, like, so you just said there you were funded for 1 year.
Oh no, sorry, 2 years.
2 years. Okay, so what was it like when you were at that point in your career where you were going on to funding, and then what was it like when you were coming off it? Because they're two very, very different things.
Well, I got on funding, and by missing one height, it made the difference of, it meant I got £3,000 plus medical support for 2 years, whereas if I jumped literally one height more, I would have got £8,000 a year, which would have made the world of difference for me, even though it's not a lot of money at the time. But then the year I got funded, I ruptured a disc in my neck and I had to have disc surgery, had a disc replacement. And then in my year review, I was told that I needed to jump, my PB is 2.26 m, and I got told that I needed to jump to 2.29 next year to stay on funding, which is basically like saying, you need to break the world record. I mean,
similar odds.
It's basically like a career-ending injury.
Yeah.
So I was starting at scratch, so it's kind of just like a little farewell, sentence, really. So I'm difficult. I mean, I hope there's not prospective, kind of athletes listen to this. I'm not painting a particularly kind of.
Don't worry, guys. We all love athletics. It's a great sport.
It does get better.
So yeah, it was hard, but I mean, I'm sure you'll have this story on here that about when it comes to things like funding, that is not the be all or end all whatsoever, and you have to find your why, your reasoning for why you're doing it, and I think when we lose sight of that, that's when it gets difficult.
Yeah. Have you had much support in your career so far, Seamus?
I'm very fortunate that England Athletics have sort of supported me in different varying degrees from probably when I was about 17. So I was put on their speed program back then when James Hillier was doing it. And I'm fortunate enough to still be on it to this day. But in terms of here's a pot of money that's yours, here's a salary, I've never had anything like that, but I'm super fortunate, like I say, to be on programs like that. I was on stuff like TAS when I was younger, and I know for a lot of people you don't get that level of support even, and just those small things having access to physio, having access to psychology support, nutrition support when I'd want it or need it, it does make such a big difference, because it is a very financially difficult sport to be in. There isn't tons and tons of support around, and like you say, when you're sort of living paycheck to paycheck as what I am now, post student, sometimes you don't have the extra money to go towards these things. Sometimes you're oh, I really know I need that physio session, but have I got the money to be paying for that physio session? So the fact that I know that I have things like that covered, and I'm super grateful for that. Plus my parents, I know that's not, again, here's your salary, but they give so much time, dedication, since I've started sport back when I was 6 years old, so I'm very lucky to have them by my side as well.
How supportive were your parents during the time when you were starting to struggle and you were starting to find things harder with regards to your athletics?
I literally think that was probably like one of my favourite like moments I've ever had with my dad at a competition. I was like at England Champs 2021, and I was warming up for the heat, like the heats of the 4 hurdles. Like there was literally one person I think that was getting knocked out. Like it was like quite an easy qualifier, and I'd already had like a couple of DNFs that year, and like 5 minutes before I went into the call room, like I called Nick and I was like, I don't think I can do this. And I went to my dad and I was like in tears. I was like, I just can't do this. And he was like, the one thing I want from you is if you don't want to do this, like you don't have to do it. And just like hearing him say that to me and realizing like he really appreciated like how I felt, like my feelings felt validated. I was like, he doesn't think I'm just like, I don't know, like a wuss, like a baby, like I don't want to do this. Like he really like respected like how I felt, and he was super supportive in terms of like whatever help you need, like we will sort it. Like if you need like can't afford it, like I will pay, like I will help you find someone. Like I just want you to be happy in life, and like say away from all like the good things that I've done, like win medals, like go to championships, have him there to watch me succeed. Like to me that's one of like my favorite moments, because like I say it was just so validating as a human.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard that before, but you know, kind of as a parent myself, it's, you know, I'm just like, that sounds like some seriously good parenting to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know, I know with like my boys, you know, my boys are young, like 5 and 2, so it could be really easy to almost dismiss their truth, dismiss their perspective as like they're just getting upset over something that doesn't matter. But it might not matter to me, but to them it does. And so I think to be heard, to be validated, to be seen, that's amazing. That I don't think you could ask for more of a parent, or could do more as a parent than that, because that's a starting point to help.
No, 100%. And again, from like him and my mum, like when I took this step away and like started working to you, there was never any like pressure to be like, oh, like after you've done all this, we need to get like back into it. Like you've had the help, like you should be ready. My dad was sort of like, and my mum, like if you come out of it and you decide, yeah, like actually you don't want to do this, like speaking with Matt has helped you sort of come to that realization. Like they'll always be my biggest supporters. Like they have so much like belief in me, and like they think like my potential is like limitless, and like I say, they've always wanted the best for me. But if the best for me was to stop because that was better for like my mental health, my like mental well-being, they would 100% like back that decision as well, which is so nice, because parents, it's very easy for a parent to get involved in like in their like child sport as well, and you get some that maybe want to like push them too far. And I think like my dad has never sort of like overstepped that line. He pushes me enough in terms of a way like he knows that like the potential like I have. Like say if I was to turn around to him today and be like, Luke, I like given it my all, like that's all I have, I'm ready to quit, like he would probably like, are you sure that's 100% right? And if I was like, yeah, he would like totally respect like the decision, which like you say as well is such a great thing to have, because like he respects like he respects like my opinion on things and wants like the best for me, whether that be doing it one way or another.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And like when you kind of look back on your journey in sport and in life, especially how that links to sport, what's the thing that you're most proud of overcoming?
Literally like that's like that whole situation, like post-COVID, like that year, like just getting myself back on the start line, like, which sounds so stupid, like I've got medals, like I don't want to be like bragging, but like I've got medals at championships, like I've been lucky enough to like represent like the country at youth, like junior and senior level. And so to be like, oh, your favourite moment is like stepping back on the start line, but I'm like, yeah, at the end of the year I first started working with Matt, I was doing like 100s and 200s just to like, I still enjoyed athletics just like to some degree, like I wanted to stay involved with it. I just felt a lot of pressure around the events that I thought I had to be like really good at. So I carried on doing them, and then just even like indoors, I remember seeing you at like British Champs indoors, and I was like, oh, I'm really like, before I was thinking like, oh, I'm really nervous, like I haven't done a 400 since outdoors, like this is like my like grand return. But with like the help of like everything you did, like I put myself back on the start line and I was like you say, you've got to remember your why. Like, why are you doing this? And I stood on that start line and I was just like, enjoy the moment. And I was like blown away. Like, I made the final like British Champs Indoors. It was my first like British Champs Indoors that I was even doing. I was like the slowest like person on paper. Like I was like 0.3 under the qualifying time. But I was like, I need to start getting back on that like level of competition. And that was the only reason I did it. I never saw myself like even getting through round one, let alone coming fourth. So that was honestly one of my best moments. Like I put myself on the start line, enjoyed myself, and then got a better result than what I wanted. And that sort of progressed throughout the season. Like the one thing I will say, like it was never like my mental health, like my mental well-being was never like a linear path. There was many times I'd message you throughout the season. I'd go from one high of like, oh my god, I've just ran this PB, like it's incredible. And the next week I'd be like, oh, I fell over, like I hate it, like it's like it's so hard, literally. Like, and I think the big one for me was at British Champs. I saw you after British Champs. I went from such a high indoors, like wow, I've come fourth in like not even my main event, and then I came 8th at British Champs, like in what was my event, and it all returned to like I put all of a sudden this huge expectation on myself, and instead of just allowing my body to do what I'd done, what I'd been practicing was not having all these thoughts, not having like all this like emotional baggage in my head before the race, and it had been giving me such good results. And as soon as that crept in again, I had this like mid part of the season where I was really struggling again. But again, just to like pick myself up from that and like end the season on high, that was like a really like good moment from me. I think, like I say, just being able to combat the challenges that I have, I think is the best part like of what I've done. Like it beats any like medals like that I've got probably.
Yeah. When you did that indoors and you came, was it fourth you said?
Yeah.
When you came fourth, how was that? Because like I remember you went into that competition just happy to be there back on the start line, and you absolutely smashed it out of the park. And I remember, like, from my point of view, watching that race, I was like, he's going to Worlds. Like, he's going to Worlds for the relay team. And it's like, that's not how it happened, right?
No.
And like, how did you go from going into the competition with zero expectations, just happy to be there, to having that amazing result, and then navigating through and showing yourself how you got through that, what I'm assuming was disappointment with not being selected? Yeah. Because that as a human being on such a high, then having something that's not what you planned or what you would have wanted, how did you get through that moment after that high?
I think like the whole reason I sort of like did well in the competition was basically from what you said, because I went in and didn't put the expectation. My biggest issues are when I go in and I like set the bar of like, you've got to do this, you've got to hit this, because then I panic if I'm not doing that, and that was what was leading me to pull up on races. Cause like I say, if it wasn't perfect, I didn't want it. So I think going into that competition with no expectations is what genuinely like brought out the best in me. I knew I'd trained so well, but I think if I'd gone in with the expectation of like, you've trained really well, you need to like even get through this heat. Like I say, I was just planning on like just seeing what happened and then like everything came together. So I think that no expectation, no pressure on myself, just allowing myself to do what I did in training, like I like to refer to it as like the flow state, like just allow my body to find that, was what led to the success. And yeah, like it was disappointing to not be picked. Like I had a couple of disappointing moments last year where I was like hoping I would get picked for things that I didn't. Worlds was probably like an easier one to take because I genuinely had zero expectations going into that competition. So to even be in like consideration for that was like wild to me at the time. I was like, whoa, I never thought my first potential GB senior vest would be in the 4x4 indoors of all places. But I think you sort of like, you got to allow yourself like time to reflect on it. Like you've got to allow yourself to be disappointed, but then you've almost got to like baggage it up and like move on. And that's like easier said than done. I think what happened with Commonwealths took me like longer to get over, and I think looking back on the season, it took me even longer than I thought it to. It took me even longer than I thought it had. Like in the moment, I thought I was over it, but I still think I wasn't for like a couple of weeks past that. But again, I think you've just got to allow yourself to have the moment. Like to have like the down moments like is as important as having like the high moments. If you don't process the emotions and process the feelings, like, and you keep shoving it away, like, it's not gonna improve the situation really.
For sure. And how do you think kind of having those disappointments and navigating through those disappointments now has put you in the position you're in today and going forward?
I think it allowed me to like reassess like what my goal was again, what like my reasoning for being in the sport. I would speak to you a lot of the times after the disappointments, and I think that from those disappointments led to a string of like disappointing results because I was still focused on that moment. And it was like I say, sort of taking a step back from it, like reassessing like what is your why, like what is the actual reason you're doing this. You came into the year for enjoyment. Like when I sat down with Nick at the start of the year, my coach, like it wasn't to make any of the championships. It was like, we want to put you on the line. Like if you run PBs, if you run good times, that's great, but we literally just want you to be like finishing races. We need a better than a 50% finish ratio.
I'll be a start, right?
Like which like we were on track for. So it was like and you were enjoying the majority of the races. So it was like, just keep on doing that. Like the things that you want will come. Like I say, all my best results came from like the indoors where I was just allowing myself to enjoy it and have fun. So I think that was like the best thing about those disappointments, that they almost allowed me to like reset, reassess my situation, and I don't want to say like keep me humble. That's like the wrong word, but it provides like fuel to the fire as well. Like I was like, next time I won't be like an option. Like I won't be so dead set on like having to make the team, but I'll also try and make it that there's no other reason to like not select me next time. Like I'll just be that little bit better.
I think you got to give yourself credit that actually you were, in my experience, extremely open and willing to be reflective. It's because obviously you went into indoors no expectation, you know, ran those PBs and then you got selected, and then you know steadily improved outdoors, ran a second PB, then had that massive dip, came 8th at the British champs. You know, so another disaster which, you know, you kind of had to get out of. You know, for all those reasons, didn't go to the Commonwealth Games even though you made the time. You know, but then, you know, went and did what you did at the Europeans. So it's easier from my kind of removed perspective, but there's so much to be learned in the failures. You know, so to personally see, it's when it starts to feel like this, it's when I add the shoulds and the expectation, you know, and all of that kind of stuff that I feel like I'm bringing with me, which we don't consciously do, right? It's just suddenly like, well, you ran that PB and it's like, well, suddenly these doors just appear and open, like, oh, I should or could be going here, there, or, you know, to these championships. And then that's when, like, you know, that low level kind of noise, the sort of expectation, you know, or the bits of anxiety and tension that comes with it, and then before you know it, oh well, you haven't executed a race as well as you should. What's the point? Right? And it's fascinating, but yeah, I just want to kind of give you credit for being able to go, yeah, I feel crap, but that's all right, and you're and willing to like actually look at, well, what's kind of going on here, rather than just pushing it away. You know, get hopeful about the next one, onto the next one, because I think that's so easy to do. Just sell yourself the dream. Yeah. I nearly did it. Next time, eh? I certainly did that.
I did that. I still do that. It's hard not to though, isn't it? Because like, I've always been really, really optimistic in everything that I do, and I have the self-confidence as well as that optimism that often, it's like what Jazz Sawyer said the other day about how you've got to be delusional in what you're doing so that you have that push to get there, and you have to back yourself so much that others think you're delusional. And I completely agree with that, but it's so difficult being present when you're doing that, because like there's so much noise going on in sport and in life, and there's so much that can go wrong that's out of your control or in your control, and how you navigate that is different for everyone, because we've all got different stuff going on as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, to me, kind of, it might look delusional, but when we get quiet, we all know what we're capable of and what we want to do, right? So I think our ability to get quiet and reflect allows us to put failures in perspective and not take that as baggage, because there was points in the season where you were taking a lot of baggage to the track.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then not.
Mm.
You know, and then, you know, understanding what's going on, well, then you're able to put that down, and so that might look delusional from the outside, but actually, I think there's something very kind of like, that's just a learning process and something very natural kind of going on there.
And I think like you have to have these moments to reflect on it, because if I hadn't sort of like spoken to you at times and hadn't been open and honest and had this conversation with people, I think I just would have ended up in the same scenario that I was in the years ago. Like, I would have been taking all these like you say, all this baggage I'm like not offloading, and it's like, doesn't matter, like if you failed on this one, you'll make it all the way around the race on the next one, and you'll run the standard for like X, Y, and Z, and all of a sudden it piles up and it ends up with like, oh, like I don't want to do this anymore. So I think allowing yourself to be open and honest with how you truly feel, and like however you sort of want to get that out, if it's speaking to someone, like a certain person, like whoever it is for you, like that's really important. I don't think I've ever said to my mum and dad, I've said to Nick, and I'm pretty sure I said to you, at England Champs last year, I literally was like in such a bad place, like with things that I full started on purpose. Like I was getting back to that situation where I was so stressed, and I was like, I don't want to put myself through this, and like I did it on purpose. And I could have easily been like Nick. I remember Nick literally sent me a text. It was like, oh, unlucky, like did something happen, did you hear this? And I like sat on the grass, and I was like, oh, I could lie to him and be like, yeah. And I just called him and I went, Nick, I was like, probably not what you want to hear, like a couple of weeks out from Munich, but I full started on purpose. And he was just like, again, it gave me that reset again. He was like, Seamus, like you can't allow yourself to get to this state again. And I was like, trying to be all sort of like laughy, like jokey about it, like, don't worry, I'll do a session at the track like tonight and like make up for it. He was like, no, I don't want you to do that. He was like, you need to go and like do what you know works for you. And that's like when I got in contact with you again, we sort of allowed myself to talk out, put things into perspective. And then the next race I went to, again, I felt great. Like I felt like the noise that I'd been like building up again, like had calmed. And I was like,
was that the race in Belgium?
Yeah, and that was the race in Belgium. I got the meet record, like it was really nice little win. Yeah, I got a little check. Got drug tested.
Well. Like, oh, nice. But in what I want to point out in the middle of that, which is, you know, basically a freaking superpower, is being honest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that ability to be really, really honest, not for your, you know, with any agenda, but just like, actually, this is how it is. Because otherwise, how often, you know, do you hear about or we experience kind of trying to manage our own thinking, like, oh, we've got to get rid of that because it's not good, and then it just creates more noise, you know, and it's even becomes a bigger and more difficult situation to deal with.
And I will say, like, even like just speaking to other athletes, I remember like speaking to like Bailey, like Stickings while I was there, and just like having those like. The one thing I found after especially the first time I spoke to you, was I like posted like the statement I sort of made for Matt on my Instagram, and the amount of people that appreciate and like respect like how open like I was, and like how honest I was about how I was feeling. I got so many people that I wouldn't have expected to like reach out and be like, oh, I'm so glad to hear you're doing better. I'm so glad to hear that you sort of got the help you wanted. Like I could tell you were in a bad place. And the amount of people that have said to me like, oh, I started speaking to someone because of like the things that you posted, like because you like said it. And it's so great. I messaged you the other week. I had an England athletics camp down in Cardiff, and we had like a confidence talk, and I just like spoke about some of the bits that you did, and one of the coaches came up to me the other day, like after, and was like, I so respect like everything that you said last night. It was so amazing to hear, and you don't realize how much like I say, being honest, being open, like telling your story, like your version of events. Like it's not the same for everyone, but people really do truly respect like hearing like how you truly do feel.
Yeah.
I love that, and just and it speaks to me. It speaks to the challenge of athletics. This individual sport, and everyone in their own little world, whether that's with headphones on or not. Maybe putting on a show of they're okay to the outside world, but it's relatable because I think so many of us have experienced similar struggles.
Literally.
I think athletics as a sport is probably one of the most relatable ones there is. I think it's so relatable, but also everyone's facing different things at the same time. Like we all come from like different backgrounds or upbringings, or we've got different life experiences happening alongside our sport as well. But like I've said so many times before, like athletics is one of those sports where you might feel alone. You might feel like you're the only person in the world that's facing this problem, but at the end of the day, there's so many people out there currently facing the exact same thing as you, and thousands of people before you that have faced the exact same thing as you. But until people can actually share that story or to find the talk into other people, that feeling of loneliness, that black cloud over your head just goes away because somebody actually understands and you don't feel lonely. And that can be the same, whether that's like, I don't know, the perfectionism that we all face, or the self-doubt, or the injury struggles. These are all things that are naturally going to happen to athletes in this sport, but you're not the only one that's facing those things, and you're not the only one that has faced these things, or the only one that will face these things. They're all natural things.
And I mean, and it's one of the things that I love, because you're so honest about where you've been, Seamus, and the difficulties, not being able to finish events, not being able to finish races, wanting to walk away from the sport, and the fact that, you've gone from there to, knocking a PB off, knocking a second off your PB and going to the European champs. It's like, it's amazing. Like for me, it's like that's so hopeful to people that can't see how on earth that's possible.
And like, one of my main things is, like you say, it was like such a great transformation, but as we sort of spoke about through this, I think a lot of people think it's like a quick fix. Like once you start feeling good, like you should just feel good the whole time. Like I say, even though that season on the whole for me looks so good, like I'm running consistently 49 seconds, like I've run a 1 second PB, the amount of ups and downs, like the amount of times that in private I was having conversations like I say, I'm not enjoying this, I'm full starting on purpose, I'm coming 8th at like champs because I feel so much pressure. Like it's literally, it wasn't just like that, oh I've worked on it, now boom, I'm like at my end goal. It was like so up and down, like all over the place. It just looks from the outside that it's a lot more straightforward than it is.
Yeah.
Like, whilst it isn't, athletics isn't, but life is a contact sport. It's that thing again of, we see, that image that what we think of people from the outside. We see what they put on social media. Well, not a lot in your case, but actually, it's, we all experience these actual highs and lows and difficulties, and that actually that's quite normal.
Yeah. What you said earlier about kind of finding your why with the sport and stuff. What is it? What is your why for doing the sport?
Purely enjoyment. Like obviously everyone has their like, oh, I believe like I have this much potential, and I am someone like, although like I don't sort of come across like sometimes the most confident, like the most like, outgoing. I'm not exactly like outspoken. I'm not like, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. I kind of like my performances to sort of speak for themselves, but I know within me, like I have potential and I have aspirations of like where I want to go, but at the same time I know the way that I will get them is from enjoying myself. So I think for me, as long as I keep enjoyment as my sole purpose, everything else that I want to come from the sport will probably come from it. And like that has shown in like every year that I've succeeded in athletics has been a year that I've like really enjoyed myself. Every year that I haven't done so well is one that I've like just not been like enjoying that much. And it could look like, oh, like did you not enjoy the year because you weren't doing well? But I know for me it was always, I'm not enjoying this that much, and then that was having it was always the lack of enjoyment which was causing the negative results rather than the negative results that was causing the lack of enjoyment. So that is like, I still stand by it. Like I always say, like if I lose the enjoyment that I have, like I will either take the step back, quit, like whatever I need to do, reassess until I can re-find that, because without that, like, what am I doing it for? Like you say, it's a 9 to 5 where I'm not getting paid. Like, I need to make sure I'm enjoying it.
Go into pacemaking, you get paid for that. Yeah. Get paid more being a pacemaker these days.
So true.
Yeah. And Matt, if I was to ask you what your why is, what would you say?
That's interesting. How do I put it succinctly? My why is to show people what's possible. That's it. So, and I think symptoms of that, helping people discover who they really are and how their mind really works, and through that we see that we're enough. We get to experience well-being, we get to enjoy our sport, and the symptom is performing better than we can probably comprehend. And there's nothing more that I'd like to do than minimise people's suffering.
I think like understanding, like you say, is so important of like how the mind works. I remember one of the first things I said to you was like, I want this trick that I can do in my mind that will just switch off like any emotion, like switch off any feelings. I can just be like, oh, I'm feeling nervous. Like, oh, no, I'm not. And you were like, kind of like, that's not how it works. And I was like, okay. And then like I remember like when we got to our last session, I was like, I really like see what you mean. Like this thing that I was looking for, like was already sort of within me. Like it didn't exist. I was looking for this like strategy that I could use. And you're like, no. Like everything you have is literally like within you already. And like I said, I think like just came from like understanding like how my mind actually sort of works.
Yeah. And it's I think it can be really hard to grasp, and it can sometimes maybe just, I think people will be like, what the hell are you talking about? Or like, that just sounds so simple and obvious. So it's like, well, of course. And I guess there's just a point where, what I'm sharing or what we've discussed, it's not an idea. I didn't try and give you an idea. In fact, I'm sure I said to you that I didn't give a hell, damn what you think about what I say, and I don't want you to be concerned about what I say. It's about what I'm pointing to, and it is about looking within and finding your own truth in this. And it is that part beyond our intellect which does the heavy lifting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's definitely something that like I feel like most people would aspire to and relate to as well. All right, everyone, we're just going to take a quick break from the show to introduce our sponsor, Rewire Fitness. Rewire is a mental fitness platform that helps athletes to become healthier, more resilient, and to reach their full potential. But most of all, it helps athletes to reduce the likelihood of burnout. This is something very close to my heart, and perhaps if I knew about this in 2020 when I was going through the worst bits of my burnout, it might have kept me competing in the sport. I've been using Rewire Fitness for some time now, and it's genuinely transformed my morning routine. I use the app to test my readiness for the day ahead before suggesting a number of cognitive training exercises to help me boost my productivity, my performance, or my rest throughout the day. If you're keen to explore new ways of reducing your stress or optimizing your performance on and off the track, head to theathleteplace.com/podcast to get 20% off your first year at Rewire Fitness. Back to the show. We're going to go on to the section called Agony Athlete. So essentially, we have questions sent in from the listeners, and we're all going to discuss some questions and some scenarios that will come up, and then we're gonna go from there. So the first question we've got is a nice simple one to start with. What's it like going to a major champs senior compared to junior or youth champs?
I feel like everything's just like a little bit bigger, like it's almost a little bit more like grand, and it's also like a little bit more, I guess like it'd be easier to be like more intimidated, because when I was a junior, especially like when I was like racing people at like junior champs or like around the circuit, I didn't know anyone. And then all of a sudden it's like European champs, it's like, oh, you could be racing Costa. And I was like, okay. I'm like, okay, that's a little bit of a different kettle of fish. I'm like not knowing the name of anyone in my race. But at the end of the day, like, you like, I feel like you've always got to remember like a race is a race. Like it's the same doing it as a junior, doing it as a senior, doing it at an open meet. Like I feel like that's what you've got to, it's hard to remember sometimes, but like it is at the end of the day, and you've just got to not let the moment like get like too overwhelming. But like I really enjoyed both. I love like the team atmosphere. That's the one thing I always love about being on teams. Just like it's so nice. Like I've made so many friends. Like one of the best things I've had from athletics is being able to be on teams, and like the friends that I've made from that.
Yeah, I agree. The friends and the social aspects of athletics is probably the thing that kept me in it for so long. And I think it's one of the things that's kept me kind of in it in the way that I'm involved in it now. Because when you're younger, you make friends with people that you only get to see at these competitions.
Literally.
They could literally live 5-6 hours away from you, and you only get to see them at these comps. And it's like now, obviously, with social media and stuff, you can then speak to them online between those things. You can have group chats with them all in. You can make friends with people that are from other countries as well. It's so cool. And these are the kinds of things like you make friends with the people that you're kind of like-minded and that get you. And I think athletics is filled with people that are like-minded and kind of relatable to one another, which I think is really cool. What was your favourite champs that you've been to?
Probably Commonwealth Youths, because like again it was one of the ones that I was like, oh, I'm gonna try and go for that. Like I think I'd won like UK school games, and that was like the first time I remember saying to my mum in the bedroom, I was like, oh, I'd love to be a professional athlete like now, like, oh, like maybe I'll be good enough one day. Like I'd never thought about it before, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go for Commonwealth Youth Games, and I came in ranked like 6th, I want to say, and then I came second. I ran like 0.95 of a PB, and I was like, okay, this is a bit crazy, like a bit crazy. So I feel like that one, because like again, it was one that just like blew my expectations away. I was like, I'd never been out of Europe at anything. Like it was just like the most wild experience. And again, like just like the atmosphere, like the team, like to be around, like to experience that. It was like, I'm just like so lucky that I had some of these experiences. How
did that kind of getting selected for that junior and youth champs help to push you on to believe what's possible at senior?
I feel like again it was the validation. I was like, oh, I work hard, like I train hard, like, and I try the best that I can, and wow, like people are really seeing that. People are like being seen, and again the amount of people that were just like, oh, it was so great to like watch you run that and stuff. Like it all just like adds. I'm not saying that I only do it for the external validation or anything, but it's just so nice to see like people support you and people wanting you to do well. And when, like you say, it's such a lonely sport sometimes, so knowing that you have that support from other people can like help push you on.
Yeah, that's wicked. The next question is going to be quite, what are your thoughts on the super spikes? So I remember I was having a conversation with someone the other day, actually. It was how when I finished under 17s and I was ranked 7th all time, and now I look back on the rankings and I'm like 15th. I'm like, damn, these super spikes. All these youngsters running around in max flies. But like, I hadn't worn a pair of those super spikes until a couple of weeks ago. And having worn a pair of them, it's hard to not think that they make a massive difference, having worn them both. But then you can also then look at the times and be like, well, I'm still running this compared to what I was running. Like, what's your opinion on it?
I kind of love them. Like, I really, but I think it's personal preference as well. There's like some people that wear them and like there's no benefit in like performance. Like they don't like seem to enjoy running in them. I think for me, the way I run, like I'm a little bit shorter. I need a little bit more bounce in my step and stuff. Like I think it gives me a bit more confidence, like in terms of that. But at the same time, like when I first got them, I was still like smashing out all my sessions in like a pair of middle distance spikes that were like not super at all, and I was still like running great in them. And like some sessions I do nowadays, I do them in super spikes. I'm like, oh, I ran better in these than like some shoddy old ones that I had years ago. So I honestly think it's just like personal preference, like whether you enjoy them or not. I do not think they're a necessity to need, like, I don't think people should feel like pressure to get them, to think that's like the way to achieve like something great in it. Realistically, like it's all the stuff that go like that you put in yourself, all the hard work and everything. The spikes is that like cherry on top of the cake, like that extra 1%, but you're not going to put a pair of super spikes on and all of a sudden be like 10 seconds quicker, like 1 second quicker, like off your PV, like just because you're wearing some different spikes.
Yeah. What about you? I feel like you kind of would reiterate something like Seamus just said at the end there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know enough about the kind of technicalities and the advantage of it, but it seems to me that I would, if I was an athlete, I would be focusing on what's the area of my largest gains and work my way down. And so when I've done the basics, you know, then I'll concern myself with how I get a 0.25%, you know, increase. You know, it's like a I don't know, someone trying to drive an F1 car who doesn't know how to drive a car but is concerned about tuning the engine. You know, yeah, just focus on the basics.
Yeah, and those basics: what? Sleep, nutrition,
literally,
technical aspects, doing your training,
keep yourself physically well, mentally well,
psychological side. You know, it's just there's just so many. For most people, you know, that's the bottom of the pyramid. There's so many vast gains there, and you know, athletics isn't a quick sport. You know, even I would say understanding your body, you know, getting regular treatment, understanding your body, so you don't get injured. You know, because if you can put together year on year training without getting injured, then that is going to be the quickest route to success there is. But you know, that's the real hard part.
Yeah,
it's not glamorous. It's not as sexy as some super spikes.
No.
But you know, if you find an athlete who's barely got injured, they'll be the ones that are, you know, really pushing, you know, their potential.
I think as well, athletes are always looking for like quick fixes, quick solutions, quick results, and obviously if you can buy something that's going to be like, oh, it's going to make you run quicker, when in reality, like you said, it's literally about the nutrition, the sleep, the recovery. It's all the things that actually require effort that people, and
consistency, right?
Effort and consistency, exactly. And I mean, it's easy to buy a pair of spikes, right? Well, I said, scratch that.
These ones are always out of stock. The amount of times I've tried to buy a pair of Max Flies.
I take it back. But I meant the process, right? In terms of you can buy something and you have it there. It's supposedly going to improve your performance, but the process in comparison of getting consistent 8 hours sleep every night, going to bed before 12, drinking enough water, doing your nutrition, stretching, all these things that require you to actually do it and turn up day in, day out. Because if you do this once, that doesn't mean you're set for the next year. Whereas if you buy a pair of spikes, they might last you for a season. Sweet, that's you done. Whereas with the nutrition or the sleep, just because you've slept for 10 hours on a Thursday night doesn't mean you get 2 hours on the Friday night. Like, that's just not how it works, is it? But I suppose, like you just said there, consistency. And this sport is entirely about consistency. It's about turning up every day. It's about showing you that you're willing to put in the hard work and the graft, and doing that sensibly. So it's the working hard and working smart at the same time, rather than just one or the other.
Literally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. This one is one for both of you for sure. How do you deal with self-doubt?
Do you want to go first? I've gone first on all of them.
This is passing it straight off, which means you can copy his answer.
I don't mind. Do you want me to go?
No, yeah, you can go first.
How do I deal with self-doubt? And I do get self-doubt, I'll be honest. How do I deal with it? More than ever, I take a hands-off approach. I don't trust it. Because for me, like, self-doubt can come with a bit of urgency. It's something that feels like I need to act on, and from experience and from seeing what self-doubt really is, I don't trust it, because what I do acting from that is crap. I make poor life decisions, or you know, whatever I do, it just doesn't go well. So as soon as I catch on to what it is, which is just negative self-talk, it's just negative thinking, and it doesn't say anything about me. It's just a product of my psychology. It's just, my brain, is triggered from something or whatever. Then, I can get to be curious and just be hands off. And the more that I've done that, then it just goes, because we're built for a transient experience. Once that goes, another experience, another thought will come, and maybe it'll come back, but it does always eventually pass. And then when I'm not in that feeling of self-doubt, when I am settled, I see life with a different perspective, and I just make so much better decisions. It's like the difference between performing when you're tense to when you're relaxed. No brainer.
Easy.
Easy.
Just like that.
Just like that.
I think sometimes though as well, like it's hot, like you don't even realise it's there. Like it can be like so subconscious, and it takes a while to even realise that like that's the thoughts that you're having. But mine's sort of like, I like to think I do what you do, but I think when I sort of recognise
I knew this would happen.
I think
Ignore the cleaner.
Yeah, wait. He's going to go into the other room anyway. Hold on. I'm just going to go and tell him to wait for 5 minutes.
Are you going to cut this bit out? Or?
No, I'll keep it in.
No, good. Keep this bit
makes
in.
it
I like
seem
this
more
bit.
real.
Yeah.
It's relatable.
Didn't notice the little sign saying we're recording.
I know. It's
Yeah, no, because it's quite quiet between there and here, and it's just like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'll be 5 minutes, and then
5 minutes.
that's all.
Make it quick.
Amazing.
I'll keep mine short and sweet from now on.
No,
Instead of rambling on.
No, you
ages.
gotta-
Like, I've been rambled so much.
Because she's not been here for like a month or so I just come back and hi again, not seen you for 2 months, can you stop moving?
Yeah.
Where were we?
I was just like, I think I was on when you realise like that I'm having this self-doubt. I think for me, my thing is to turn to like my support system, like you, Nick, like my parents, like just be open, be honest about it. And then all the things that you were saying, like you say, it sounds so easy, but you sometimes can't pick up on yourself, and I just sometimes need that refresher. And like, I feel like I have a lot more skills in terms of dealing with the self-doubt that I used to have, but sometimes you just need that refresher and be like, by the way, like, you don't have to feel like this. And then like I'll have a session or so with you, and then again I pick up the pace. I'm like, oh, I'm getting back on track now. Like I can notice it next day and accept it and allow the calmness to like sort of come over.
I think the interesting thing in that is that it's just, well, what a good job our mind does is that, it doesn't necessarily come up with a label of self-doubt. We're sucked into our reality, our version, and it seems like, well, I need to be questioning myself, and that's just what's going on. But part of, we are built in at some point, we can question, and we can be like, oh, actually this isn't right, or I want to do something about this. And it's part of how we've worked together is helping you find that kind of understanding. So there's this point of going, actually I kind of recognize this. And I think the deeper that understanding goes, obviously I'm a kind of few steps down the road from where you are on the same kind of journey, that we see that, well, the system's designed to settle. So it will kind of recalibrate.
Yeah, amazing. I think that's a perfect place to end, to be honest. I think you both smashed that question.
Before the cleaner comes back.
Before the cleaner comes back, exactly. Clean up all of our mess from earlier. But no, I think that's like definitely something that I can kind of, I know a lot of people are going to take from that, because self-doubt is something that we all face every day to some extent.
Yeah.
And I think, like we were talking about earlier about not feeling alone with this kind of stuff, self-doubt is prevalent wherever we go and in everyone. So knowing that there are ways and that each of us deal with it individually, and knowing that there's no right or wrong way of dealing with that as well, is a great thing as well. So Thank you so much for joining. It's a pleasure to have you both on there. I'm super excited to see how you get on this year, for sure. And I'm really excited to see how you get on as well, because I think this is just the beginning for your journey as well.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
All right, everyone, we're just going to talk about our biggest project at the Athlete Place, the Athlete Parent Place. So the spin-off that we've created is actually an online platform where young athletes and their parents can learn the ins and outs of the sport from elite athletes and from experts across the field. So we've created 10 different packs from nutrition, sleep, emotional support, education, anti-doping, you name it, we've created it. So this is an online platform where you and your parents get access to content from elite athletes, from your role models, to make your life easier, to make it so that your parents, your number one supporter, know exactly how they can support you best, how they can make your life easier, and how they can increase the chances that you reach your performance goals. So check out theathleteplace.com. If you go to our website, there's a section that says parents. Click on the parent area, and that's exactly where you'll find the information. You'll find how you can get support, how we can help you to reach your performance goals, and how we can help your parents to have a better understanding of your sport so they can help you better. Trust me, you really don't want to miss out on this. I, for one, would have loved this when I was younger, but all the elite athletes that we've worked with and are working with in the future all say that this is something that's going to change the nature of sport from a performance and a well-being point of view. So head to theathleteplace.com, click on parents, tell your parents where to find it. They're the ones that are going to be signing up. They're the ones that are going to benefit, but you're the one that's going to help, have the extra help and reach your performance goals. It's all about you. They're the ones that are helping you get there. Check it out, theathleteplace.com, parents.